that's okay. Well, thank you so much, Mara and Eirik, for being willing to speak with our community. It's just a real joy to have the two of you. And Angus and I have um, really enjoyed seeing how One Solution Global keeps expanding and growing. And we remember flying to our first conference for that you did in Oslo, which was very exciting. And it was like a whirlwind tour. I think we were there for 3 days and then we flew back, but it was so worth it. And I wanted to just share with the group, I'll share your bios in the email, but I just wanted to read the vision statement that the two of you have for One Solution Global because I really love it. And so it says, One Solution is working to solve large-scale global challenges by helping individuals, community, and systems to change from within. We believe that educating people about the mind so they can reconnect their innate well-being, so they can reconnect to their innate well-being, resilience, and capacity for new ideas is the most efficient and sustainable solution to any problem. And so I just think that is a beautiful way to capture it. And it's very much in alignment with sort of what Angus and I have been doing in the rewilding community, helping people to reconnect with that well-being inside of themselves and then seeing what the magic is that comes out of that in their own lives. But I'd love for the two of you to share a bit more about, what your experience has been with One Solution. If you want to tell us sort of the story of how it came into being, or, you don't have to start at whatever point feels alive for you currently.
Okay. Where should we start?
Well,
1990.
it's born in 82.
You were born.
Yeah, no, not necessarily the story of how it started, but it just occurred to me when you were talking about rewilding. One of the reasons I was so excited to do this with you is because I really love that word, and I've actually been learning a lot about rewilding in terms of environmental restoration and what it does for the soil and ultimately life on Earth, and our ability to survive and thrive in a sustainable way. And I think it's such a beautiful word because it implies that there's a going back to a healthier state that's pre-existing in all nature. And I feel like that's kind of what we started One Solution to do. Is it became very clear to us in our work working with human beings and discussing the mind and looking at our innate resilience and well-being and how actually profoundly simple it is to reconnect people to that because it is already within them.
Yeah.
It might be a wilder state, one that they haven't experienced in a while, one that they maybe forgot or got covered over by, years of conditioning or traumatic experiences that they developed, unhelpful ways of relating to in their mind. But it's been our observation that everything in nature wants to return to its more natural state. And when it does, there's this amazing sort of intelligence to the interconnected biodynamics of life that just comes alive.
Yeah.
And so it's been really encouraging for me, both working with human beings and looking at the environmental crisis and seeing all these different, seemingly multi-layered, very, very complex issues in the world, and going, if we can just help nature get back to its essence, its natural, wilder self, that there's a balance that wants to emerge and that there's a health and a thriving that wants to emerge. And so our job is not to solve every single problem one by one in the world, or our job is not to teach people things that they don't already have. It's really just to point people back to a more fundamental state of being such that they can reconnect to that life force and that nature that wants to burst forth in all of us. So I love that term. I love the hope that it offers pretty much at anything you look at, whether you're looking at the human body in terms of physical wellness, or whether you're looking at the environment in terms of sustainability, or I should say regenerative ability, and also just the human spirit and what systems we have created to date and how we might transform those to be more healthy and to be more aligned with thriving in the world. So that's kind of the spirit. It's not really the.
If this was a microphone, I would. I don't have anything to add.
It's not
to that,
the
really.
historical explanation of One Solution, but it's a
Right.
feel for the spirit of why we created One Solution.
Yeah, it's a great one. Yeah.
Beautifully said. And so what's currently happening with you two? What are the current projects? What are you both seeing? We'd love to learn more about that.
Sure. Well, when we started, we didn't really know where to begin, really, because it's like what Mara just said. It's like everything, like we could look in any direction and we can go anywhere. So in the beginning, it was a lot of just kind of trying things and working with different people or looking at different issues from a new lens, issues that we hadn't looked at before, um, conflicts and war and the environment and racism and gun violence. And so looking at that in the beginning was just like really fascinating, because we start to both like see what was going on behind of it and also feel a deeper connection to it. Like I think before, I'll speak for me, I hear about all these things happening in the world, but I don't have a bodily connection to it, because it's like that's something that's happening, that's messed up, but that's over there in a way. And trying to look at them closer made them real, because now we had to like feel them and like connect to them, like almost like this is happening to me, not to something over there. This is happening to us all, and I'm part of that. And because we randomly ended up in Chicago, we got that huge connection to what is going on here. And Chicago is kind of like a microcosm of the world. It has all the things that the rest of the world has. It just looks like Chicago. It has the Chicago version. So right now, I would say that 80% of our attention and work is on looking, on solving not specific issues, but looking at how can Chicago be a healthier, more vibrant, be rejuvenated, be unified, find its own solutions to what it's struggling with, in the most holistic way. And our best guess is to try to look at it from different angles, look at it from a kid's angle, look at it from a teenager's angle, look at it from a parent's angle, look at it from a school angle, a teacher, business angle, systems angle, politics angle. So we found that even with the work we do, we have to look at it from different perspectives and see and prove the point that we all got to change. We can all shift and we can all see something new. And I think in the beginning, it's very tempting to look at Chicago and look at the problem and say, those people who are doing those things, those need to change. Mm-hmm. Like if there's gun violence, for example, is a great example. That's got to change. We've got to have people put the guns down. It's like, well, what is that an effect of? Like, why is that happening? And to do that, you got to zoom beyond the person with the gun. You got to see like there's a holistic connection that has to do with more my societal consciousness that produces this type of environments. So that's what we're interested in. Just because of time, we can't, and our capacity, we can't look everywhere all the time. So that's why we're like, let's put our roots in Chicago, and have like between 20 and 40% of our time to look beyond that, to do projects that inspire us, that we can connect with, people we can partner with that do different things, that we can connect to our work. So that's kind of been our journey of like trying all kinds of stuff. And now like once we came to Chicago, we have some roots here. We're like, let's see what we can do here and put real effort in. So
and just to add a little more detail, like the trying out period and the learning, as Eirik said, we had to really create an intimate relationship of listening and learning to these different areas of conflict, and see, is there really something here? Is there a way in which we can point to this natural ability in all of us to kind of reconnect with the life force, if you will? Is it realistic when we're talking about things like the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So like in the beginning of One Solution, after that conference that you and Angus attended, because it really was just a conference at first to explore an idea that
Right.
that this was a solution to the world's most complex problems. And then it was like, okay, well, we really felt like it was a hypothesis. And so we had to go out into the world and ask the way, any researcher would, like, is this actually a valid hypothesis? Can we really help in this way? So we went to places like Gaza, and then with another partnership went to originally to speak at a peace conference, and then that turned into us falling in love with this city, and as Eirik said, kind of randomly moving here and deciding to put a stake in the ground here. But
You know what, it just went out, so I missed a gap. So I heard the part that you went to Gaza, and then what happened after that?
okay, sorry.
Go ahead.
So we went to Gaza and learned both from his Israeli perspective and a Palestinian perspective about, the deep rooted thought systems behind that conflict. And then we went to the Democratic Republic of Congo with another partnership that we had, really looking at how to help young people really believe in the potential for them to change their future, to have a more entrepreneurial mindset, to not believe that they had to just kind of continue on the same path of poverty that they'd seen their whole life. And then coming to Chicago, initially to speak at a peace summit, but then sort of falling in love with the young people we met here who were passionate about not wanting to live in the prison of gun violence, the psychological prison that gun violence had them in, and the geographical, because there's a lot of limitations on where young people can go because they fear for their life. Mm-hmm. And it was really interesting to go to these different places and learn from people. You begin to see so clearly how everyone wants to return to that more natural state so badly. They just don't think they can because of the various thought systems that have been so ingrained in them, culturally and through experiences and trauma and fears and things like that. So it was really cool, especially like when we were talking with the young people in Gaza, even us walking in there, it was so tempting as an American stepping into Gaza, being scared. I mean, there was a lot of, like, the environment walking in there was like nothing we'd ever experienced before. So, you have Hamas coming and checking your vehicle, and they've all got, military grade weapons on, and everyone is very kind of confrontational. So there was our own feeling of kind of like beginning to doubt the hypothesis. Like, is this really just about helping people reconnect to their innate well-being? Like, is it really that simple? Because it looks a lot more complicated. Yeah. But then what was so cool is even just in the span of spending a couple of days talking with these people, it became so clear that, yeah, they just want to reconnect to a better feeling inside themselves. And when they reconnect to that better feeling inside themselves, they immediately become solution oriented in their thinking. So they go from kind of blaming the other, blaming the situation, blaming politics, blaming the dot on the map they happen to be born in, to suddenly going, well, I want to make Gaza better, and I want to be a person who, gets involved in politics. And it's amazing how natural that shift is to go from being kind of this, well, I guess this is scary as hell and we're stuck in it, which we were even tempted, to feel that way walking in there. But then to see that any human, which I think is true of any form of life, when they reconnect to that space, it's like watching something start to grow. It's like, it's so powerful to me how quick that is. So it was an experience we needed to have to kind of like go around and see these different issues and really see, is it true? Now, it's not to say that, oh yeah, and then overnight the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is solved. Obviously that hasn't happened, but it gives hope for the possibility of how really regenerative the human spirit is and nature is, and how these things would actually be able to solve themselves so much quicker if we were focusing on reconnecting to that more natural state of well-being. Like, it starts to really look possible that major issues could be cleared up in a shorter amount of time than we would think possible when we just look at the environment or the circumstance or how long that problem has been around. And same with working with the young people here in Chicago. So now our question is just a numbers game, a scalability game. Like if you hang out with the young people we hang out with in Chicago, you would be so hopeful. Like the changes we've seen them make in their own lives, the way they talk about community now, unity, being a part of humanity in a different way. Like it's so inspiring, but kind of our new challenge is just figuring out how to scale that. Because we see that it works. It really does.
Yeah, the hypothesis is on track.
Yeah.
It's how to get enough to get to a tipping point.
Yeah, we just need a larger sample size now.
Right. We need to clone the two of you a few times. Well, I know that you're developing leaders within your community too to help it be scalable. So I'd love to learn more about the specific work that the two of you have been doing in Chicago and how that was to enter into this community as outsiders. Did you have any connections before coming?
Just Dejan.
Well, and even that was
made. Yeah.
No, I think all the connections were made just gradually. But I think we follow the people who were kind of interested enough to want to listen in a way. And we had very few I can't remember it, a bad experience. Like people were usually open. But I would say there was a point probably like 4 or 5 months in after going back and forth here where we were like, okay, we're starting to meet people and build relationships, and like people start to feel hope or want to do more. And we're like, we can't just like leave now. You know what I mean? We can't like just do that because that's also something that's happens a lot with nonprofits coming in, and there's a lot of skepticism when people just coming in here and it's never going to stick and people don't really care and all that stuff. So we were like, if we're gonna continue, we gotta kind of go all in. So that's what we did, and like really go and like trying to get to know and listen to everyone we met, whether it was a kid or a parent or a teacher or a nonprofit or just feeling the vibe of the city in general or visiting different areas and talking to people. So there's a lot of continual trying to understand what's going on from their perspective. And then that turned into like what really kind of initially turned into was working with youth, because they were so inspired by the idea that they could create change in Chicago. That they had the solution inside of them. Yeah, there's some sirens there. So that was like the main thing, like that's what we wanted to do initially. But then they were like, yeah, I love working with these teenagers, but the younger ones, they kind of listen to their parents. And if their parents aren't there, they're like, okay, so then we got to work with the parents. And then the kids said, if we only work with the small kids, they were like, well, this is amazing, but when I get home, this happens. Like, okay, so that kind of led to us working specifically with like leadership programs for ages 15 to 22. Really seeing how can we find or remove the stuff that's in the way of their inner leader. So we call them like dormant leaders. They're there. It's just there's just so much noise around them that they can't see it. So that has been really, really inspiring, because that age group and that spirit and that aliveness and that hope that comes from that and the action has been really, really, really amazing. So that's kind of the things we still focus the most on, is developing and helping youth leaders in that age group. But then
and that the youth mentor the younger kids, which is great, because it immediately connects them to a leadership role in developing their peers in the next generation. And they all say, as I'm sure you've heard a million times, like, man, why didn't anyone teach me this when I was younger? And it's like, well, you can solve that too.
That's right.
Yeah.
So
There
now,
you go.
So
So
now
now-
we've got them teaching 6th, 7th, and 8th graders,
Oh, it's fantastic.
which
So
has
this
been
is
fun to watch.
so now that, yeah, the young leaders are now working in schools, which especially during COVID has been amazing because teachers are like, please help me.
Yes,
Yeah.
please take over my class right now.
And then they're so cool, so they're having so much fun. Like when they're in the studio doing the classes, we just hear laughing and like they're having the best time.
It's
So
been so fun to watch their evolution because, of course, they were nervous in the beginning. It's like, man, I don't want to have to teach a class on Zoom, and these kids are going to be so checked out. They couldn't have been more wrong. Like, the kids love them. They say things like, oh, I want to be you when I grow up. And they get so touched. They tell me, like, you know, a 6th grader said they want to be me when they grow up. And then just yesterday, one of the facilitators said, yeah, I mean, I'm amazed these classes are just like flying by. I wish we had longer than an hour. I feel like we need more time, which is just so cool to hear, you know, a 22-year-old say, I wish my class was longer.
It's great. Yeah. So that's the ripple effect happening already, it sounds like, in terms of those leaders spreading it.
yes.
And I remember the two of you having a conversation, might have been a while ago, but it was around how you had to find your own way, that you didn't sort of look to what has already been done in communities, but that you really looked within yourselves. I'd love for the two of you to speak a little bit more to that, because I think that's so helpful for all of us, no matter what we're up to.
Yeah.
You should say that because you kind of pushed me off that ledge in a really helpful way.
Okay. Yeah, I think when you're up against something that's completely new, and we started to use what was not new or speak in a way that wasn't new. And what I mean by not new, I mean like whatever we have learned, whatever frame of reference we have, whatever language or way of being or speaking is trying to be introduced to a person that doesn't understand or is interested or care about that. Then there was this like that this this doesn't work. So extremely quickly we were like forced to forget everything that we had learned and see like how, if we started fresh, how would we connect with this situation or this person or this problem. And that opened up like that learning you have as a newbie, like someone who doesn't know anything. Like we just like skyrocketed in how we were able to connect with people because we were completely new in thinking about that and our approach and what we think we're doing or what we think they should get or not get. And there was a trial period of like not knowing, like just like hanging with them, does that do anything? Playing video games with them, does that do anything? Talking about this, does that do anything? What are they interested in? And then new things started to develop, like the interest and the possibility for art and music and different creative expressions to really move the needle on societal issues was like, oh, we hadn't considered that because we were kind of trained in a more programmatic way. So if you look at how nonprofits run, it's usually a traditional program. You do this with this amount of kids, and you do this for this amount of parents, whatever it might be, and you track that and figure it out. Mm-hmm. But we started seeing like when we just visit different, like we went to people's houses and just sat with their family, and they would bring their kids around, or they would want to do this or create music or poetry. Like, what's that world about? Like what so that we became fascinated by like what's beyond the programmatic model and how can we reach, and does change happen that way? It's not easily trackable in terms of if you weren't to do a study about it, but is it impactful? 100%. Like that's how we've seen people change, is this organic new thing. And especially with kids, they're like, they don't want to sit in the program necessarily. Like they want, it's got to be fun, it's got to be new, they want to express, they want to play. So that really opened up the door for us to become playful and listen and figure it out and find new ways, even though it really was scary. It was like, how you know, like, what do we do then if we can't do, like, what do we
What do we
do,
say
what
we're
do we
doing?
say? You know, what do we say we're doing? So a new language started forming and a new way of continually updating language depending on who we're talking to, new way of looking at, seeing new ways of what actually creates change. So
And it was like a rewilding process. And I think that the kids led us. It was like, obviously, to Eric's point, we figured out really quickly that it would be really arrogant and really ineffective to just walk into a new community, a different culture, problems that we've never personally experienced, and go, I have this program that I think is really going to help you. It was like, no, we need to shut up and listen for a while. And it was really, I'll never forget one day asking one of the kids who, and that was what was interesting, is just different kids would show up. It was kind of, it was very organic, and different kids would show up. And then, you know, the ones that always came back and the ones that left for a while and then came back. And I asked one of the kids that just randomly showed up, like, why did you come? Because I hadn't seen him before. And he was like, oh, well, everyone says the vibe of this is really good, and that you guys actually listen and actually care what we have to say. And it was really interesting because I know there's so many well-meaning teachers and programs out there that ask young people what they think, but it was true. Like, we completely handed over, you know, we let them come up with their own name, Rebels for Peace. They came up with their own t-shirt, their own logo. They started having podcasts, and we didn't try to control the content of those podcasts or tell them what topics we thought they should be speaking to. So there were some podcasts that we'd be kind of listening to and cringing.
what are they talking about?
I don't know if that's what, but it was like, in the grand scheme of things, you know, one podcast that goes off the rails, whereas the rest are really all about what unifies us, the resilience we have in us, the potential for these young people that have never seen a future for themselves to become leaders and come alive. It's like, who gives a shit if we have one podcast that's, you know, like, it was a really cool experience, especially for me, because, you know, to Eric's point, I was used to running, you know, seminars and conferences and workshops with well-behaved people that sat there and listened, and I could, you know, control things. And it was so beautiful and wild feeling, and really scary at first, but really lovely, because I just learned to trust these kids and listen to them and see that there's so much more value and just showing up and being human and truly listening to them and trusting that we do all have this resilience inside of us. So there's not one way to get there. There's a million ways. And if you listen, they'll tell you their way, you know?
Exactly. Yeah, it does feel very aligned with rewilding, because that one podcast, or however many podcasts that go off the rails, is just kind of like all part of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that Angus and I really loved about the term, is that there's kind of this idea, and you know, for us, we work more with people that are looking in, you know, what they would call probably a spiritual direction, but there's such a sanitized view of what that means to transcend the human experience, and we're like, no, let's get into the human experience and experience all of it, and the richness of that, and enjoy the messiness of it, and see that that's how we reconnect to our natural state. So that was something that really, you know, excited us. And there is that wildness of, you know, where's this going? What's happening? It's out of control, but isn't that beautiful?
Is this getting too messy? Where do we draw the line?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's so true. And I think one of the things that stopped us was like, what would people who think a certain way think of this? So it's like, so if they saw this and they think we were doing whatever they think we were doing, and they were like, what is this? This is not correct. This is not, you know, and it's like, that's so stupid. You know, I would say, like, to think that, but like, that was like, what would people, and it's like, that's not what it's about. Like, this is amazing. Like, it is wild. It is different. It is like, that's what we wanted. We wanted something different. So we can't expect it to look exactly like this. So, but I was surprised how much I was like, what would people, I was like, oh, that's, don't go there.
Yeah, that old conditioning.
Yeah.
It's like, it creeps in at times. And then I'm curious, in terms of the events that happened last year with the killing of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement, I'm just curious how that impacted the communities you're working with, the work that you're doing. You know, did it show up in ways? I'm assuming it did, but I'd love to know more about your experience with that.
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it definitely impacted, I would say in general, the whole country, but, we felt it most in Chicago is that there's some really bad increase in people struggling like financially and uncertainty. There's a lot of negative effects that happen after like George Floyd, but then you don't have an environment. You have this COVID environment, which creates a lot of uncertainty. So it gets fueled in not so good of a direction. But then we saw a lot of good things too of people really wanting to create change, like and not only in communities, but like business people take it like way more seriously now to think about things holistically. Like, in the beginning, maybe some do it just because they're supposed to do it, but like, who cares? It's still moving to thinking more of thinking more holistically, think more as a unit, and trying to involve more diversity everywhere. So that has definitely the look for diversity and look for inclusion and look for that equity that has grown in a good way. But still, after that and after COVID, people are really struggling and overwhelmed in especially, the poorer environment, that those are hit the worst. So that has been hard on the city and people. When we talk to people, we know people are stressed and overwhelmed, like parents and teachers and everyone are like, how do we, and business owners, small business owners, or like, so
it's interesting though, having like we have every summer we have Rebels for Peace internships that run for 6 weeks at a time, and that's where we get another cohort of kids in that age range, and that was all happening while we had one of the cohorts. And so you saw the dynamic shift really quickly because the kids were all working on, we focus on learning about the mind and connecting to your resilience so you can be a leader of change in your community. And we don't direct what that change looks like. They can go in whatever direction they want. And we just try to help give them the mental resources, the spiritual resources, and then literally some of the physical resources. Like some of them want to write books or make films. And, we try to help connect them with ways to do that. So it was interesting feeling the tone of the internship shift when all that started happening. Like it did become a lot more charged. And all the Black Lives Matter protests going on and things like that. But what I loved, and you can speak more to it than I can because you were physically present for more of it, because I'm on mom duty a lot these days, but there was this really cool allowing of the chargedness, because there was this foundation of understanding that humans cannot help but live in their own perceptual versions of reality. So of course I'm going to have a very strong reaction that's consistent with like the thinking I was raised in, or so it was, I don't know, there was something about it that was just really interesting watching the kids, because there were times where I felt like, oh, this could get tense and hairy, and it didn't, because I think they were coming from a perspective of understanding that we live in these different versions of reality, and that underneath it, we're all doing the best we can, and that we all really are connected underneath our thought systems. And so, I don't know, there was something about kind of like watching everything that was going on in the city of Chicago with the protests, and we had some rioting and all that stuff, but then kind of watching how this group of young people carried each other through that experience in a really wise and kind of beautiful way. And then they all supported each other. So like one girl did like lead a Black Lives Matter protest as one of her projects during and like all the, interns went and showed up for that, things like that. So it was, I don't know, there was something about being connected to young people while I was watching that made it different for me than I think it would have been. And otherwise, it just also opened up a lot of really cool conversations amongst our whole team. And we ended up hosting a day sort of virtual event where we had different speakers of different racial backgrounds, sort of cultural, socioeconomic, talking about that. And I think the thing that excites me the most about what that triggered is it made people see thinking they'd never seen before. I mean, particularly in the white community. Because I don't think it was intentional on the part of a lot of people. Some people, yes. But I think a lot of people, there's just this invisible veil of, oh no, I love all people, so I'm doing good. But to suddenly realize, oh, there's 1,000 things I do a day that aren't actively anti-racist that I had never seen before. You know, that feels different to me in a way that's very encouraging.
Yeah, I agree that even, especially for myself, even to just kind of see that more clearly, and to see the need for that active engagement, which I think is so important. And what you said about the kids, I love that there was room for all of it. Like, because of the foundation, they can have room for their emotional experience, and it's not about having to be, zen or neutral. It's like there's room for the human experience in that, and the foundation of understanding how the mind works allows us to be more human fully in a way.
Yeah, and it was like, I remember one person created a video with a voiceover with like images, really uncomfortable images. And they did a showcase for the rest of the group, and then you have some people asking questions like, oh, I love this, it's exactly what it, or like, wow, that was rough, like, are you sure this sends the right message? And then when he explained, he was like, it is the right message, like, I want to show this, because they're like, where's the hope in this? It just seems very, but he's like, I know, but sometimes you got to watch something that's uncomfortable, and that's okay. And there is still hope, but we got to look at all of it, and we got to allow ourselves to react. And if you look at, the reactions after George Floyd, those are reactions. They should just happen. They aren't wrong. Those are natural. So it really increased kind of our way of looking, of allowing anything to come out, any emotion and any way of looking at it, and not, like you say, try to have it be zen or have it be like blah, and always feel like hopeful, or always feel really good when you look at it, or like, and so it's like, no, that's not, it doesn't have to be that way. And you can be impacted with all colors of the rainbow with that. So that was really cool.
Not to flog the rewilding metaphor to death, but I feel like
we're very happy for you to do that.
The same in nature. Like, I remember reading about this couple that bought a farm in the UK and decided to rewild it, and how ugly it was, and that the neighbors were like, what the hell happened to that farm?
This up.
And they were like, believe it or not, this is like
way
a thriving, shiny, healthy example of nature. You're just used to seeing everything mowed and everything fenced off, and it's like, no, nature's pretty funky looking in a lot of ways.
That's a great example. And it reminds me, because I see your post on Instagram, how you have the ugly vegetables or whatever. It's like, they're all delicious.
Produce, yes.
Yeah.
So I know we're coming up to close, but I wonder if there's anything you want to say about how it is running a nonprofit, what that's been like, just that journey of moving from sort of having corporate businesses to a nonprofit entity in this way.
It feels like we're in the midst of an evolution around that right now.
Yeah, actually. We're always learning about that. We're learning about how it's the same. It's exactly the same as what we did before, but we can think it's not. But it is the same. But it is a different game. I didn't mean to rhyme, but I'm a rhymer, but that did rhyme. The same, but anyway.
There it goes.
So I was like, I got 3 more words coming.
If you had just broken into some sort of rap or spoken word, that
I could have done it.
Perfect. But anyway.
So we learned how to, we didn't want to play the game of a nonprofit. We were like, we just want to do it our way. It was like, yes, but creativity could also go into finding ways that we might think is boring but gets the job done. We were like, I don't want to write this boring grand, because that's not like, I want to write it this way because that's not what we're actually doing. We're doing this. We're like, I know, but that money helps you do that. So it's like our mind was kind of limited of our ideas of how we wanted to look versus like doing and having the freedom to do what gets the job done, and learning the game and the playfulness of, and the opportunity of running a nonprofit, seeing like there's a lot that we could do that a for-profit business can't. There's a lot that we can't do that a for-profit business can. So
I remember someone, when we first started One Solution, we were kind of open to, did we want to be a nonprofit, or maybe look into some sort of B Corp, or some, some sort of hybrid model. And a guy that I talked to, who I think it worked for the UN for years, said, just don't ever be a nonprofit, because once you get on that bike and start pedaling, you can't stop. And I remember being like, ooh, that sounds scary. And then later I was like, that's true of any organization. It's not like when I ran a for-profit, I just got on the bike and then kicked back and watched the pedal itself. I was like, what other business have you worked for where you're not the one pedaling the bike pedals?
Maybe the UN.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe. Yeah. So I kind of like, I feel like you hear a lot of almost like negative press around running a nonprofit, like, oh, it's the hardest thing you'll ever do. And like, to Eirik's point, it's like, no, you just have to put yourself in the game and then get creative about how you play that. And I don't see that as different than any other kind of organization. And
it's like that guy said, what's a nonprofit? A broke business? It's like, no, that's not. That's not actually. People think that, like, it's basically.
They hear it and feel sorry for you immediately.
People who have no profits and are begging from us. Like, that's not. It's purely an organizational structure. Yeah. And after that, you can have freedom and think way closer on impact. When we run our business, we were like, it was just to do things, but like for nonprofit, it's like, once someone gives us money, it's like, okay, how do we translate this to something changing, like immediately? Because we don't have products. It's like, okay, so how do you change people's lives with what is given to you? So that question, it changes your focus so much of like, okay, versus when it wasn't about that, which it could be in a for-profit business too. It just wasn't. It's like, okay, it makes you think differently because people are maybe giving for a specific thing and they want that thing to happen. So it's like having hundreds of investors, but they don't want return on money, they want return on change.
Right, impact.
And feeling the good pressure of that, but also the opportunity, like, that's cool. Like, people want to invest in change, like, and they're trusting us to make that happen. So that's that's a really cool thing about a nonprofit.
Yeah, I love that. I love that it's seeing that you're just in that form being creative within that form of organization.
Yeah.
And we come up against the walls in our own minds about that all the time. Like, we think we're being creative, and then all of a sudden we realize, oh my gosh, we've gotten so stuck, we completely forgot about this other way we could have been being creative about it. So it's like I said, we're kind of in an evolution of that right now, which always feels fun. It's like you uncovered a door you didn't know was there, kind of feeling, and that's just going to keep happening all the time.
Yeah, and nonprofit is a lot of testing things. Nonprofits were created to solve issues that the government couldn't. Like, that's what. So there should be room for innovation the same way it is for businesses. Like, businesses who are starting up and are trying to do something that hasn't been done before, they do a lot of trial and error. And so there's also a period of being kind with ourselves, of like not feeling bad because we're failing, or we made the wrong decision and somebody trusted us with our money, and but that's part of it. So that's also part of this, like, getting okay with, you're trying to do something innovative. It's innovative. Is that how I say it?
Yeah.
It's gonna have trial and errors, the same as a for-profit business, and people know that. So you can trust that that's part of the process. They want impact, but they're also investing in you solving something that nobody else has solved before. So it's like, that's cool.
Yeah, it is. No, it's fantastic. And if people want to support, I mean, I'll include the website information, but are there any specific ways that you're looking to have people contribute or support at this point in time?
Yeah, I mean, at this moment, we have kind of two different ways that people can support. There's either on our website, onesolutionglobal.org, people can donate, which right now, most donations are going directly to the Rebels for Peace youth work that we're doing. And then we're also part of a collective called the IOS Collective. And that website, ioscollective.org, we're currently looking for people to help sponsor aspiring community-based change makers to go through a 10-month-long leadership program that we're doing in partnership with two other nonprofits that work in the criminal justice system and education. So those are kind of two immediate things that we could use help with right now.
And if there is someone in your community that really are inspired about donating or have connections for real estate, we are looking to purchase a huge building. I don't know if we have time to talk about it now, but like that's a big project. And sometimes we're like, well, should we mention this there? Like, yes.
You never know who hears it.
But the reason is that needs a lot of resources to make happen and a lot of partnerships. So if anyone's interested in that, please email us, because we have a really exciting project of a big kind of multi-purpose center that we are trying to build here in Chicago.
In a very, very neglected area of the city that has potential to be amazing.
So much.
You know, the theme and the purpose of the building is bringing resilience, creativity, and innovation to that part of the city, because it's sorely lacking there.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. Well, I'm glad you're putting that out there into the world. And if there's anything more you want to send me on that, just send it to me and I'll make sure it goes out in the email that advertises this. So thank you both so much. It's so great to connect with you. I hope that Angus and I can come to Chicago at some point and visit what the two of you are up to. We'd love to do that.
Would love that.
Yeah, you would have fun here.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you. Have a great rest of your day, and look forward to staying connected. Yeah, I'm very grateful. And Angus sends his love, and he's sorry he can't be here.
Right back to him.
All right. Take care. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.